Meghan joined Google in April 2019 and serves as the global event strategic lead. She partners across Google to understand how events drive business, build communities, and promote cultural connectivity, informing strategy for a global team of amazing event professionals. She leads an internal external innovation effort called Experience Institute, focused on exploring and reimagining human-centered multimodal experience design.
Welcome to Eventus 365, the podcast that's all about corporate events and the magic behind the scenes. I'm your host, Yanique DaCosta, and I am excited to take you on a journey through the world of corporate events. But before we dive in, let's talk about the stress of creating marketing material for your events. We all know how tough it can be when deadlines are tight and resources are limited, but guess what? YKMD Visual Communications has got your back. Our design firm specializes in working with corporate event professionals just like you, and we're here to help take the stress out of creating stunning graphics for your event. Our team of expert designers can deliver custom brand-compliant designs in just 12 hours. So whether you need branding, signage, marketing materials, or anything else, YKMD's got you covered. Okay, now that that's done, let's start the show.
So Meghan, thank you so much for joining me on Eventus 365. And I kind of just want to go ahead and start out running. How do you measure the success of an event, and what kind of metrics do you use to evaluate its impact?
Heyo, coming in hot.
Yeah.
First question, loaded question. Yeah, so I'm gonna redirect the question a little bit, because we measure the success of an event like any other large corporation, right? Like predominantly today, right now, we're tying the success of an event to things that are easy to measure, like return on investment, revenue generation, lead gen, and that's across all of the teams that support events at Google. Butts in seats, right? Engagement scoring, like those sort of net promoter scores. So right now we're not any different than any other corporation, large enterprise. We are trying to move in a different direction though. And so I'd love to talk a little bit about how we're reimagining or rethinking how we might measure in the future. And as we sort of have been on this journey building out the Google Experience Institute, which is a research development innovation community, both Googlers, but lots of external thought partners, disruptors in the industry, we've discovered that ROI isn't actually helping us tell a holistic, broad, good value story. ROI is really limiting. It actually doesn't get to the crux of the value of what we do as experience designers, and we want to change that. And so we're working to build out what we're calling right now the Expo framework. So it's experience outcomes, performance objectives, and it's a system that ties all of these things together to tell a fuller, richer, better value story, because there are a lot of things that events are some of the best tools to do from a strategic business perspective, right? Cultural progression, reputational risk management, persuasion and influence, even belonging, right? Events are some of the most powerful tools to cultivate belonging inside of an organization or between an organization and external communities like customers. So we're working right now to sort of validate this list of strategic outcomes and tie them to tactical KPIs or performance measurement that will help not only Google, but the industry tell a better value story around success, what good looks like, and how we're supporting not just our individual organizations, but how our industry is supporting humanity and the world. So I'm really excited about that. But I today, Google doesn't look terribly different than any other organization.
I love where you are taking it, though. I think as people continue to reimagine what events look like, this is a really great time to kind of pivot and almost wipe the slate clean for a completely new direction. And I don't know if you had ever gotten a chance to listen to an episode where we did with Naomi Claire, or even Liz Lathan. I think both of them have a very similar approach to like where the event industry should be and how to kind of use events to make a very specific impact on the world, not just like the company and the company's bottom line. And even then, right, like even when you're talking about that, how to use this as a tool to really connect and build real relationships with people, where people feel connected to you in a way that like a sheet of paper can't possibly give them the ability to do. So I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that level of insight, and then kind of also giving
Naomi and yeah, for the record, Naomi and Liz are both part of the XI work. Naomi is a dear friend. Yeah, and I'm getting to know Liz more and more, and just love the work she's doing to community build and reimagine what community even is, right? So yeah, big fangirl of both of them. So I love that you brought them up.
You know what? That was not a setup. I didn't have that planned. I was like, this reminds me of conversations I've had with them. So really awesome to hear that. And look at it's a power team, working on changing and like evolving the industry as a whole, which is really cool. So talk to me about like what role storytelling plays in event planning for you, and like the kind of direction you're taking it in. And how you incorporate the like narrative elements into event design and execution.
Yeah, so I mean, most of my job is storytelling, whether that be telling stories about urgent needs across Google that need to be addressed right now today, or painting stories about possible futures to help us be more proactive to set ourselves up for the right futures, for events at Google. I think storytelling, it's Brene Brown, right, that says stories are data with a soul. And I think that's so beautiful. A lot of times we're asked as strategists and designers to provide data, but the stories are really the most powerful things that we can offer to support decisions that we're making or directions in which we're driving. I think stories are also a way to connect work to humanity, and bring people back into focus, right? As we do what we do day in and day out. A lot of times I think, even though we're designing for humans, humans can get lost in the fray when we're so heads down focused on business outcomes or business objectives or revenue targets or blah, whatever it is that our end goals are as designers or as organizations. I think storytelling is a really powerful way to focus back on the right things, which is the people that we're inviting into the experiences that we design and that we're designing for. It's not just about what we can get from them, it's about what we can do for them. So I think stories are super important. And I think thinking about the stories that we tell is more important than ever in what is a really complicated time for human beings. And telling stories about how we can bring people together to solve big problems, I think is also a really, really amazing opportunity for us in our industry right now.
So as you were talking, you see me with my little pen. I like when you talk, I take notes so that, I don't go bird and just totally space. So when you're talking about designing these events, right, for humanity and like really being able to tell the story and be relatable and thinking about like who you're designing the experience for, I feel like it is super important. I mean, I know for me and quite a few other people that they see themselves in the story and feel like they are welcomed to be a part of the story. So what are some of like the key elements that you think are necessary to create an inclusive and a welcoming environment at corporate events? And like, how do you make sure that everyone kind of feels valued and included, right? Like it's sometimes it can be hard enough, like being a minority and you walk into the room and you're like, I don't know if I'm in the right place. Or, someone who may have a physical disability and they're like, oh, they didn't think about me. Like how do you navigate that space and use elements to help make sense with the storytelling?
Yeah, this is such a good question. And I don't think there's any one or two or 10 right ways, but I think through the XI work, we're learning that having a really good shared understanding between audience and designer of who is showing, not only designer understanding who is showing up to the experience so that they can then design for them against their needs, with them in mind, in ways that represent them and include them, right? But also an understanding of the audience, by the audience, of the designer's intent and purpose, right? And so we're seeing that this push and pull of information between design team, planning team, whatever you want to call it, and the audience is actually really valuable, because not only does it help us better understand how to design effectively and how to love on that audience in the space that we're inviting them into, but it also helps the audience understand exactly what to expect, why we've made the decisions that we've made, and they know that they've had their opportunity to inform and influence what that design looks like. So just having that push and pull has been a really interesting experiment, and we've tried it in a couple different ways with the XI work. We've used Naomi and Storycraft Labs experience profiles to just understand sort of dimensionality of the people that are showing up. What are their learning preferences? What are their social preferences? How do they belong? What does belonging mean to them? We've also held focus groups and sort of done these like open curtain design conversations with audiences. More people show up to those than we expected, because people do want more of an active voice. And they also just want to know what the heck they're getting themselves into now, I think, more than ever. But yeah, that push and pull, I think, is really important. I think it's also, we have this motto in XI that is consider everyone. And it doesn't take much. It's pretty simple. It's just like looking outside of yourself and your own objectives and looking at people's full personhood, so that you're not asking them to leave any of that at the door when they come into your experience. And we're finding that even opening the door for the conversation around belonging and asking questions around accommodations or hidden disability in different ways, or opening doors for people to be more transparent and open and honest about their needs. It's just simple tweaks in communication style and adding additional layer of warmth to those conversations. It's nothing that has cost us a dime or, taken a whole lot of extra effort. It can be really simple.
So the two things that kind of struck me the most about what you were saying is, number one, consider everyone. And it kind of ties back into it a bit, but like a collaborative work environment. So for me, and I'm pretty sure I've told this story on this podcast at least once. I remember when, I was working in corporate and we were building out these varying assets for a trade show booth. So it's not like a whole show, but just like the booth itself. And I couldn't understand what the sales team needed because I wasn't participating in the event. So they would come and they would tell me that we need this and we need this and I'm like, every salesperson is giving me contradicting information. It's just not syncing up for me. So I said to my boss, I was like, hey, I need to go to the trade show. And he was like, why? And I was like, I need to go to the trade show because I need to understand what they're doing there so I can actually like design an experience actually going to work for the customer. And well, first of all, that became one of every trade show. I went to every trade show after that, which was hilarious. They were like, no, come, we need you. But it gave me a completely different understanding and appreciation for what would set them up for success and the space and environment that they would be in and how clients would interact with the actual display, the booth space, whatever, amongst a sea of other things going on. And I always talk about how collaborative marketing processes just have to be. And not necessarily just for events, but just overall, like understanding not just like the marketer, right? or not just understanding the designer, because sometimes a designer, my designer people don't kill me, like, but it's not pretty. What is that? It's not pretty. We don't. And then you have a sales guy who would just be like, can we just get a big yellow sticker that says sale? And you're like, yellow's not in our color palette, like, and then you have the actual client who's like, I don't want to read all that. I don't even care about that. Why are you telling me this? This is not what I want to hear about. So being cognizant of the fact that there's more than one person in this experience, and like all those people have to be thought about. So I love that you were talking about that. Kind of circling back a little bit, what kind of like technologies? I know you were talking about using some of the surveys and like doing focus groups and things like that, but what technologies are you incorporating into your like execution to kind of enhance the event experience? And like, what are you kind of like most excited about incorporating into the future as you guys roll into this new direction of like a human-centric design experience?
Yeah, I think this is a big question, but I can give you a couple of examples of things that I'm excited to continue to like pilot and prototype. But just going back to the comment that you just made, because I think it's such an important it's such an important realization that I think we've had. You can invite 10 people into the exact same experience, and it will actually manifest itself in 10 different experiences, because each of those human beings is uniquely and radically different. And they're bringing in their own lived experience and their own lenses and their own objectives and all of that into that same experience. So a lot of what we have to do as designers is situation craft. So design a situation that can lead radically different people into a similar direction so that they can connect and get meaning out of whatever it is that you've designed. And we're finding that a lot of times that just means offering choices so that people can navigate things in their own ways and they can mitigate their own risks and define their own commitments within an experience. But I think that's such an important call out that we take for granted. We think, well, we've used these personas and we've designed this thing, cater to our audience, but actually like all of those people are having radically different experiences in the same room. And it's sort of mind blowing to think about. But back to the technology question. We're really lucky at Google that we have like really beautiful digital canvases and wayfinding opportunities. But a couple of the new ways that we're leveraging those is deploying visual language on those to help people predict and prepare for what they're about to walk into. So at our recent XI Days event, we used our digital canvases and technology to help people know this experience was designed with this sort of profile person in mind. Okay. So people could map to things that would probably resonate with them more easily. We also deployed inclusion icons on those, which are a new visual language we're piloting right now that I'm really proud of, that helps neurodivergent people or people with sensory processing differences understand that an experience might be loud or might be bright or might be crowded or might have some sort of scent. And so we do those on all of our digital canvases to help people
make the choice.
Move away from things that may or may not be triggering for them, or again, mitigate their own risk, right, with information. We're also partnering with a company called Nowhere right now. So last year we launched a project called the New Project, NEU, for neuro inclusion at IMEX in Vegas. And we're carrying that work forward this year. It's all about education and enablement to help environmental designers and experience designers be more neuro inclusive for the 25% of the global population that are neurodivergent. And we're partnering with Nowhere, which is a metaverse company, to scale our ability to teach using their immersive virtual environments. And so not only are we hosting like focus groups in Nowhere, but we're also doing a mass intake right now. If you're interested in contributing or learning more, you can find information on my LinkedIn, but we're going to be designing a fully custom neuro-inclusive space in nowhere that will allow people to enter into an immersive virtual environment that will show them, here's how you might arrange seating to be more neuro-inclusive. Here's how you might greet someone at registration in a more inclusive way. So we want this technology to help us scale our ability to pilot and prototype design frameworks and tactics, but also put people in an environment that will help them learn how they could apply these things in their work, in their lives, in their design. We realized pretty quickly we were never going to be able to do all the things we wanted to do in physical space because of budget constraints and potentially even space constraints. But guess what? We can build anything we freaking want in the metaverse, right? Even moonshot that may not even be invented today, may not even be possible, but can help us figure out the right features to drive forward. So, so I'm really excited about that. And I don't know how you feel about the metaverse. I've sort of struggled to find my voice around it and figure out how to use it in a way that felt meaningful to me. But this feels good and right, and like a really good use of a cool technology, but for the greater good in the real world. Like, how might we use these technology platforms to scale, but also come up with really good ideas about how to optimize human connection in physical space, So those are two things I'm pumped about.
So honestly, Megan, I couldn't write fast enough. So I'm hoping I remember everything because I was way too excited about a lot of things. And I was like, wait, and then wait, and then wait. But I want to start two things. I mean, when it comes to the metaverse, I admittedly am still working on me. Okay. It is a constant journey of a fast moving evolutionary space. So I'm taking my time and I'm giving myself some grace. But when you were talking about new, I was like, I want to be a part of that. I want to be in the room. I want to learn more about that. So, don't be surprised if you see me in your email, like, hey, how do I be a part of this conversation? I want to be there. But I want to kind of circle back to one of the things when you were talking about the visual icons that kind of communicate to different people about the event experience so that they can, choose to opt out or like mitigate their own risk. And this might be like a weird question, but if, let's say there's an experience that might make someone uncomfortable, how do you provide like an alternate experience that doesn't have that thing? Or do they just have to like miss out on it? Or are they then redirected to somewhere else that they could get similar information? Because in my head, I'm like, gosh, I would hate to miss it because, I don't know, maybe I have epilepsy and I don't want to die, or dying is dramatic. But, like what happens there?
Yeah. So, great question. No, you can't duplicate every single experience, right? But how we've been, our point of view thus far with the XI work is not everything will be for everyone, but you should be preparing people for what you're offering, and you should be considering everyone in your holistic design. So at XI Days, for example, where we had scented experiences and where people with scent sensitivities, they could yeah, exactly. You could mitigate your risk, right? You could go in and enjoy that for as long as you needed, but we also had completely scent-free zones. And we had sensory spaces, what we call resilient spaces, where you could go for recovery. You could also completely avoid that experience altogether. We still had like the print materials from those galleries, and you could still access the content without immersing yourself in the experience. So there were alternatives. But we didn't do like a 1-for-1, right? We didn't have two totally separate galleries. We just allowed people to sort of choose how they wanted to engage for how long. And then we had deprivation zones where you could go that were also quiet. Some of our experiences were loud. Some of them were bright. Some of them were low light, which can also create sensitivity or can be triggering. There was always somewhere you could go that would provide the opposite experience, not necessarily in the same way or with the same offering. But again, like, there were options, lots of optionality, lots of choice. And we, trusted people to sort of make sense of what we had offered in ways that would create the most meaning for them. And we were worried about it. I'm going to be really honest. I was like, there's a chance that this could epically fail, but it worked beautifully.
And you also don't know until you try, like, which sounds really corny and like stereotypical, but like, I think sometimes a lot of people, like, I'm just going to go with people in general, get like analysis paralysis and like they don't press go. And so they never know if it's going to like fail or not. And then all of a sudden someone has a patent in their idea and they're pissed. So I think that's completely fair. Thanks for sharing that. Circling back again to like kind of like the metaverse situation, because I feel like you were kind of alluding to the scalability and the flexibility that kind of offers. It made me feel like it was a really great segue into balancing like the need for creativity and innovation with like practical concerns like budgets and time constraints. Like, can we build this entire stage in 3 days? Well, we can build it in the metaverse, probably faster. So how do you balance that need, creativity, innovation, and then time and money?
Great question. I have not found the silver bullet for this yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes creativity and innovation trumps practicality, where we feel like it's necessary. So the new project, for example, we saw a critical need. We saw a large, percentage of the population that was being underserved and left out. And that would not stand to our community. Like, we had to do something about that. That was not on the roadmap for last year. Practically, logically, we should not have pursued that work. We didn't have budget for it, but we figured it out. Alternatively, I think this year we're taking a more practical approach to the XI work. We've built this incredible community of hundreds of people around the globe, and they consist of, a bunch of different types of designers who balance each other out, quite frankly. We have, corporate entities. We also have LARPers, and we have philosophers, and we have classical musicians. We have all these different types of human experience proprietors. But now that we have this community, we want to get a little more pragmatic about landing the plane on some of the work, building out really good, universally usable resources for the industry. And so I think, we've sort of been on this seesaw. I don't think you can do both at once, is my point. It's sort of this age-old question, like, when you're a working mom, how does she do it all? Well, she doesn't.
Some balls get dropped.
I can speak from experience. Like, you're either being a kick-ass mom or you're being a kick-ass professional on any given day. You can't wear a million hats at one time. And so I think what we've discovered in the XI work is we're forging ahead and we're pioneering and we're doing the innovation and the R&D and the creative work, or we're taking a step back and we're figuring out what to do with the creative work that we just learned from and how to practically implement it. And it's always a trade-off between the two. And we're lucky that we have so many amazing thought partners that are helping us figure out how to navigate that process of when to lean into what. I would say, like, you can't do it all at once. You have to sort of pick and choose and follow the research, follow the data, follow your instinct. We say a lot that there's magic, like true magic happens when you mix proof and practicality with gut-led guesswork and instinct. And so we sort of toggle between these two places in the work that we do. And that's sort of become, my everyday job. Like, sometimes I'm living in the present, sometimes I'm very much living in the future. But it's always a choice about what is the most urgent need right now, and where do we need to lean in.
I think everything you just said, it kind of made me internally chuckle just a little bit, because when I'm like having conversations like with potential clients, like for the design firm, more so this year than anything else, actually, even towards the end of last year, a lot of it became conversations around their budgets and what they don't have. They're like, we don't have a lot of money anymore. We actually so context. So the design firm offers like a month-to-month design package, like for event planners and marketers. And we were working with a couple of companies that like let us, they stopped their subscription towards the end of the year. One specific one, actually, she brought on like full-time in-house staff. She was like, no, we don't need you guys anymore. I'm like, cool, no problem. See you around next time if you need us, whatever, we're here. January, didn't even make it to February. January, she calls and she goes, yeah, so budget got cut, had to let some people go. We're actually down to less designers than we had when we first started talking to you, and help. And it was kind of interesting because we've been finding ourselves basically coming in to help with like the lack of budget and then the lack of resources to give people like, yeah, they still need the design assets, but they still have this expectation to produce like this ridiculously large thing, because not everybody's thinking, okay, well, we need to sacrifice this and this because we don't have this. Everybody's still just like, hey, by the way, smaller budget, but we still need everything. So as you were talking, I was like, I like that approach, but I think that approach removes me from the situation entirely, so I hate it.
Not necessarily. I also think like people talk about innovation like it's just net new invention all the time, but it's not. Like innovation can look like using something that you've had for all of time in a slightly different way.
Yeah, that's fair.
Realizing that a tool that is good for X is also really good for Z. And reapplying or repurposing, like some of the work that has been the most innovative that has come out of XI is more about making the best possible use out of what we already have, or thinking about it differently, tinkering with what already exists. And so I think, a lot of people get really, I was actually, Naomi and I, back to Naomi, we were presenting at a,
Naomi's gonna be like, was I on this show?
She should have been. We should have invited her for sure. We listen, she's like one of my best friends now. We hang out, we talk almost every day.
Yeah.
I'm obsessed. But we were presenting at an association event, and I won't name names, but it was all about innovation, and the XI community was like relatively new at this point in time. And so we were sort of socializing the very beginnings of that work. And there was this guy in the audience who was basically like raised his hand and was sort of like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, what do you mean innovation? Like, we are all just trying to like get through the day. We're still in a, we're just coming off a pandemic, very much still coming out of this. And it sort of flew all over me in that moment, but reflecting on it, I was like, I have real empathy for that, because he assumed that we were coming at him like, you need to innovate and you need to, completely revolutionize everything that you're doing, when in actuality, like innovation is just taking what you're doing and rethinking it in a way that makes you more efficient. Creates more love for the work that you're already doing, supports people in a different way, right? It doesn't have to be complicated or technology driven or any of that. It can be really, really basic human things. And some of this is just getting back to the foundations of why any of us got into this industry. It was because we loved people and we love bringing people together, and we, we're people. Somewhere along the way, I think a lot of us forgot,
Well, gosh, yeah. And I can definitely see how that could happen, because sometimes you're sitting around just looking at the spreadsheet like, okay, did we get this? Did we get this? Did we get this? So I completely empathize. I swear, sometimes I talk like I'm an event planner, but I'm not. People actually confuse that sometimes. They're like, so are you? And I'm like, no, I just talk to way too many of them. And it's funny when you were talking about like the innovation, like repurposing what you already have. That's essentially that same client I was talking about. That's essentially what they did, because they actually came back to us at like a higher tier, because that tier could give them what they lost in their in-house in-house designers at like a lower price point. So it completely makes sense. And they weren't doing something that was completely new, just a different approach with like different tooling. So that I totally get that. Gear switching just a little bit. We talked about innovation. We talked about how you were like using technology to kind of create a more welcoming space, like with the different identifiers or icons, maybe icons, we're going with icons, that communicate the event experience. But how have you, or how do you plan to, as you like evolve the event space at Google, or the event programming space, or event execution words, how have you been ensuring that like DEI values are integrated into all aspects of event planning, from like speaker selection to like attendee engagement, marketing and branding? I know like for me personally, like when I'm like looking at guests for the podcast, I'm looking at people like in the beginning of their career, who people are like super seasoned 20 years, like people from like different industries, different regions, different locations. But like, talk to me about what you are implementing to ensure the same kind of values or similar values are integrated into your event experiences.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm really lucky that I work at a company like Google where DEI is like infused and it permeates, every part of our organization, all of the work that we do. We have incredible resources internally for how to do an inclusive event. We actually have like governance for that. Like you can't do a manel at Google, right? Like that would just, it just would never happen. But I think how, we've been approaching the work is how can we take it even farther? We have an awesome foundation of DEIBJ at Google. But where are there gaps? Where are there opportunities? I think we're particularly responsible for diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging, and justice in our industry because we are inviting people into shared physical space. We are building communities. And so we actually have an obligation, we have a responsibility to lead in these areas. And so we've really been looking at where are there gaps, where are there opportunities, where could we advance certain causes, where can we amplify the conversation around intersectionality so that we're actually like spotlighting that there's more to people's identities than just race, gender, sexuality, right? There's a lot more to humanity than just these historically acknowledged dimensions. And a lot of marginalized communities stretch across multiple identities that are marginalized, right? And so intersectionality is a really important conversation. But I have to say, all in all, I'm really lucky because I just walked into Google when I took my job here into an organization that had really amazing foundational principles in all of this work. And so all we're doing now is just trying to find opportunities to advance, enhance, fill any gaps or opportunities that might exist. So yeah, I mean, that's the work that we're doing.
Thank you for that. And that's actually really cool. I think sometimes, there are instances where people talk about it, but you don't actually know like what kind of real execution is actually happening behind closed doors. And I mean, it's really an evolutionary thing, like you said, because there are different ways that people are coming from like life and their life experiences. Because I even remember like even the acronym itself changing, right? Like, because at one point it was like D&I, then it was DEI, then it was DEIB, and now DEIBJ. And it really just depends on like who you're having the conversation with to kind of be like, okay, no, where are we? We're constantly learning and innovating and like being willing to like open yourself to understanding that just like anything else, it's a constant education because things change, just like the metaverse kind of thing. So keeping yourself up to date and incorporated, another little sting for me to make sure I keep myself up to date.
But you're a really good analogy though, Yanique. I think the technology, the evolution of technology and advancement is on similar pace with social justice movements and movements, advocacy and allyship movements. Like all of this is changing so fast. And so it's really important to listen lean into marginalized communities. As their identities evolve, we also have to evolve the way that we're thinking about DIBJ. And I think this belonging conversation, not to belabor it, but it is so important. Like, you cannot have belonging without inclusion. You cannot have self-actualization without belonging. And isn't that the ultimate goal? Like, if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, self-actualization is at the top, and all the other needs have to be met in order to get there. But that is the ultimate goal for us as human beings, is to get to a place where we're self-actualized and we can be our whole authentic selves in any environment. And as environmental and experience designers, it's our job to try to push people in that direction. And that means we have to include them, we have to represent them, we have to help them feel a sense of belonging. I take that really seriously. I see that as like, that's my job as an event and experience professional.
Meghan, you know how at the beginning when we were like talking offline, I was like, oh my gosh, everybody's saying you talk to Meghan, and like I was like, oh my gosh, long overdue. I completely understand why, because I'm like, this is like one of those like really like soul feeding conversations that kind of make you feel like, oh, this feels like a warm hug. So thanks for that. I think this is a really great place and a really great note to kind of end our conversation. But before I let you go, this is kind of this season's, or one of this season's, like, everybody has to answer question. Name one event you feel like every corporate event professional should attend, even if it's just once or maybe every year. Like, what's that one event you're like, this will change your life?
Oh boy, this is a hard one, because I am sort of on a personal journey to go to all of the weirdest possible events and experiences that I can find.
Okay.
I'll try to share one that has like a pretty low barrier to entry for people that aren't into weird things.
Okay.
There's a festival that happens every year in the Las Vegas desert, like off the strip outside of the city, called the Rise Festival. Okay. And it is it's part music festival, part like well-being, part food truck fair. Like, it's a little bit of everything. But at the end, there's a lantern ceremony, and you get like paper lanterns, and you write like things that you want to release, or stories that are no longer serve you, right? You write them on these lanterns, and then thousands of people in the desert all release these lanterns at the same time, and they all sort of like float up into the sky. I shared this on another podcast last year, right after I went to the event, but it is one of those things that is forever burned into my memory and into my bones as like such a moment of connectedness with a bunch of strangers. And that was such a powerful, transformative moment for me. Also just a really beautiful experience. So I would say the Rise Festival. I think it's something that blends like a collective activity with ritual, but it also feels really accessible and inclusive for everyone. So yeah, that would be mine.
That actually sounds really beautiful. So thank you for sharing. I don't think I knew anything about this festival. So although I swear sometimes that question is also just like my secret pocket to put in my secret place to put things in. Like
all the coolest experiences in the world.
Yeah. Like what do I get to do this year? Okay, Rise Festival. Okay, makes sense. Thank you again, Meghan, for spending time with me today and sharing your story, your work experience, and kind of giving us a lot of insight into how we can evolve within the space of events.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure. Appreciate it.
Awesome stuff. Thank you.
And that's a wrap for this episode of Eventus 365. We hope you enjoyed listening and learning something new today. If you enjoy the show, please leave us a review on your favorite podcast platform to help event professionals discover us. Don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode, and sign up for our newsletter for behind-the-scenes content and updates on upcoming events. If you have any suggestions for future topics or guests, or just want to say hello, you can reach us at info@eventus365.com. We love hearing from our listeners. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you next time on Eventus 365.